Welcome to the first ever Red Book podcast, brought to you today by myself, John Feigenbaum, publisher of this new edition of the Red Book, and Jeff Garrett, senior editor, who's been with us here at Whitman for a long time. And we are embarking on a new way to discuss this book that's never been done before. We are going to come to you on a regular basis, once or twice a month, with new discussions about either the history of the Red Book or the history of coins in general that are in the Red Book, how we got to certain kinds of prices and contributions, and all kinds of details that we hope you will find very exciting and interesting to discuss. In future editions, of this podcast, we're going to have other experts join us and share their thoughts and knowledge of this really interesting business we call the numismatic trade, or coin collecting, or however you call it. So today, without further ado, let me introduce you to Jeff Garrett. He's the senior editor of the Red Book. Jeff, really great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
I think this podcast for Red Book is really a great idea because the Red Book is so important. When I started getting involved with it, many years ago, it was kind of like doing it for pricing and getting involved in it with different ideas for what would be good in the Red Book. But the longer I was involved in it, the more I realized how fundamental it is to the hobby. If someone starts in coin collecting, like if you give them a Whitman album or a folder, one of the first things you do is also give them a Red Book. And so the book is fundamental for beginners, but then also what's important is even the most advanced coin collectors or dealers have a Red Book usually on their desk. So I don't think there's been ever in a book, probably in numismatics and probably any other collectible field, that has a book that covers every level of expertise. The book because I get a lot of people, like, when I see them at coin shows, that have me sign a Red Book, and it'll be a little kid, and then I'll have some guy that wants me to sign the book they've been collecting for 50 years. So it really does show the broad-based support of the book, and it truly earns the name, the label iconic, which I think not many things in the hobby or even the world deserves that label like the Red Book does. One thing that's when I guess I kind of got involved in Red Book, I didn't really understand the history of it and how important it was. And I guess to let people, viewers, know kind of how I got involved in Red Book, and you probably not even know that, we haven't discussed it as well, is back, my first book I did was 100 Greatest U.S. Coins, which I'm really proud of, because before that I didn't know I could even write. So I got involved in it, and someone said, hey, that might be a good idea for a book. So I kind of jumped into it, and I put together this book about the 100 greatest coins. And when I did the book, it was, mostly the stories are what's important about it. But then the people, as Mary Burleson, at the time, she would say, well, we need to have pricing in it. So, because, Whitman's all about price guides. We're about, we're price guides. And I said, well, it's the stories, but that's probably true. And people need to know if this coin is 100,000 or a million or 5 million. So I sent in my first experience with doing like price grids. So I did the pricing for that, and they were real pleased how that worked. And I was kind of uniquely positioned for doing pricing for Whitman, because that was my first foray into writing. But I buy and sell coins, millions and millions of dollars a year, tens of millions in some years of dollars worth of coins. So I have a lot of practical market experience. And as you know from doing pricing, it's a very nuanced thing to do, because you can see three of the same coins selling in an auction for three vastly different prices, and you have to be able to understand that and be able to interpret that and put it into a basic price guide. So I helped with that. And then about 5 years later, after that, I did the most ambitious book I did was the Encyclopedia of U.S. Gold, which was it covered every gold coin made from 1795 to 1933. It had a color photograph of every coin. I'm really proud of the book. It's a wonderful reference, because for the first time it covered everything: proof gold, all the complicated issues and things. So that book needed pricing. So when I did the pricing for that book, then I was asked to kind of take over pricing for gold coins for Red Book. And that was probably 15 years ago, maybe more. And so that's when I kind of started working really closely with Ken Brissett on pricing. And it was sort of a awkward, semi-comical experience because the Red Book for years and years had been done basically on index cards. And Ken Brissett, even today, is not, not real proficient on like using Excel or some sort of database. So when I get it, I would get printed out sheets and I would kind of have to write them in margins, and it would just like took forever. And so the kind of the evolution was I just took over that segment, created spreadsheets, and then I would go down in my basement and work for a month or so, knock those out. And I would then Ken Brissett would look at them and he would say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure 1932 20s. Are you sure they're worth that much?" or something like that. And we go through that process. So I held for quite a while doing it like on that basis. And then I kind of considered it almost like an apprenticeship because I knew that Ken Brissett is he's a miracle of preservation. He's 96 now, but he's still like unbelievably active, mentally sharp. And this was, let's say he was 80 back 15 years ago when we were working on this. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall. Eventually, he would want to step down, and I might be able to fill that role. So it kind of slowly evolved, and I would do it. And then at some point, I was doing all of the Red Book. I would, go down and work for like 2 or 3 months working on these spreadsheets. With I know you, John, do understand how arduous that is, and I know that I was kind of like one of the few people in the country that had like the expertise to do it, first of all, and also the efficiency to do it quickly. Also deadline, do it on time, and being able to kind of go through and with accuracy that they could trust. And for me, it was worth doing because I knew eventually that the payoff would be to be more of the have a chance of being the editor for Red Book. So I was working on it for a long time. It really is old school when you think about it. It's like an apprenticeship that I was doing, and and it was my name was not on the cover. I was just in the inside. We get paid very little, but I enjoyed doing it, and I've also the Whitman organization as a group, I had a lot like the 100 Greatest really helped raise my profile in the hobby. The encyclopedia helped a lot. So it was a really good symbiotic relationship, and I enjoyed doing it. The Red Book goes back to 1947 is when it started. It actually started as a Blue Book was the first one. A lot of people don't realize that the first book was the Blue Book. And then they evolved into the Red Book. And if you go back a little bit further in history, the reason Whitman was successful and started in the beginning was during the Depression. They came out, they had taken over the idea for doing coin boards. And coin boards were like, made an explosion in the hobby during the Depression. There was people were looking for something fun to do that wouldn't cost much. You could go through your pennies. And hobbies in general became super popular. A lot of people don't even know that, but in the Depression, people got into stamp collecting. Another thing was a big boom was jigsaw puzzles were big in the Depression, and those were also made by Whitman because the Whitman organization, the printing house, had bought these die cutting equipment that was ideal for making jigsaw puzzles. So they took that and adapted that to make the coin board. So that was kind of how that evolved. And when coin collecting exploded, there was the organization realized there was no good price guides out there. There were a couple like B. Max Mel had a star catalog that people that was out there back in the 30s and 40s, but not a real good like official price guide. And then once they started they kind of created the demand for a price guide, and then they fulfilled the demand for that by starting the book. So the book had been around for a long time. It was R.S. Yeoman. Also, it's fun to talk about history of Red Book. A little bit of trivia. A lot of people don't know that R.S. Yeoman was a pseudonym. His real name was Dick Yeo, and he changed it because at the end of World War II, Yeo sounded a little bit too Asian. He didn't want that to hold him back with the sales, so he changed it to R.S. Yeoman. and that was his pseudonym he used for the Red Book. But so he did that for a long time, and then also um, uh, Dick Yeoman was not a real serious numismatist. So he was putting a price guide together, but he was really not advanced as far as some of the other people. So what he did is he was the creator of not creator of the contributor system. So he went all the great minds of the day, all the Fair and Zerbies, the Dick Brown. There was a whole bunch of guys that he went. So he went out and gathered up all the sharpest guys in the business at the time and helped them do the price guide. So he created the contributor system, which has kind of been the basis for Red Book for, it's, I think a lot of its popularity for generations, because a lot of people kind of get bought into making sure it had good scholarly information. And I think also it kind of broadens the appeal, because everyone knows that, hey, this book was, all these Abe Kossoff, all the guys all the major players were involved in it. So that's been fundamental for a long time.
Well, let me, Jeff, first of all, great intro. Basically, I just want to say that this is podcast number 1 for this Red Book podcast, and you've already made me take notes on about 7 different topics that we could almost dedicate to different podcasts, whether it's Richard Yeo and his story, which is pretty well documented. I think Dennis Tucker had documented that in a whole book, or I think Ken Brissett and Dennis did that, and all these other aspects. And that's the beauty of this podcast, is that we're gonna visit each other as often as we can, which is probably every 3 weeks, and we're going to bring in industry experts to come and share different aspects, especially if we're talking about a specific series. But the first topic that I think enters, that we should introduce this whole Red Book podcast is this whole brand new aspect of things. And there's a story to be told here, whether it's the fact that, the company of Gray Sheet, which I bought with investors about 10 years ago, becomes the pricing standard within the coin business at the dealer level, and has grown into a retail level, and then meshes with you, Jeff Garrett, as the pricing expert at the Red Book. And we say, wow, this is too big a job for you, Jeff. And this is what I always think is, like, how could one person really manage this, who's also a full-time coin dealer, who's also you're working on editing and publishing and writing books as you do? It's too much. I already know it's too much, because I know it's involved. I do pricing to some degree. I probably do pricing 2 to 4 hours a day, and that keeps me on top of it. To come in and dip in for a few months now, it's much more sophisticated than we've ever been in terms of the depth. I think at last count, Jeff, there was 13,000 records, different rows in the Red Book for the 2026 edition. How could you possibly update even that with, gold went up? What did gold do? Like like $300 or $400 since the last edition?
It's gone up a ton. I think about this evolution of where we are from, the Red Book, and it's kind of funny, John. When I think about it, it's like you bought your team bought Gray Sheet, and Gray Sheet had been the same for what, 50 years, and it was basically a flyer that was a few pages, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 pages. And now you've turned it into, really, it's a wonderful magazine. It's interesting to read, and it's got content, and it's changed drastically. And the Red Book is wonderful as it is. It had gotten, I think, somewhat static, and it needed to have some new energy put into it. And I went from initially, when you called me one day, and I didn't really know about the conversations, and tell me, you called me up one day and say, hey, Jeff, I just bought Red Book. And I'm like, wow, you're kidding. And I didn't know about that. So tell me a little, talk about that a little bit. What was that like, going down and negotiating and, looking at an iconic brand? It was probably so many things you didn't know what you were what you were after.
I had no idea, and that's true. What happened was, as you mentioned, Mary Burleson, who had been the president of Whitman for at least the last 10 years or so, a wonderful person, great manager, and she had overseen this large operation that they call Whitman, with folders and books and all, many authors. And I would see her at an occasional Baltimore Whitman Expo, which is something that Whitman also owns 3 times a year in Baltimore. And I would see her and I'd say, hey, Mary, just to put a bug in your ear, if this ever becomes available. And the owning family is the Anderson family, just an incredible family in Northwest Alabama and in the publishing trade for almost a century. So as coin collectors and publishers, they ended up owning Whitman and fostering this brand. And generational change happens. And I think I caught her finally on a good day. And Charles Anderson, who many of us know in the business, who's now also turned 90, I believe, this year. And Charles said, I think it's time. And John, I've been watching what you're doing over at the Gray Sheet. As you said, we converted the Gray Sheet from a photocopy flyer to something that's industry. It was always an industry standard, but we became more vital. And it's a passion of mine. And I really appreciated that he trusted me at this point. And so therefore I got into the conversation about, I call it the dog catching the ice cream truck. So now this is something completely different for me because my background, like yours, I was a coin dealer since I was a kid. But I actually enjoy the data a lot. I actually enjoy the data more than the trading of the coins. And I thought I was good at it. And I still think I would be good at it, but I love tracking the pricing and trying to help this industry because I believe that the industry itself needs leadership in pricing. Otherwise we go the way of stamp collecting and these other 1930s era hobbies that again, another podcast for another day, but stamp collecting is gone the way of something. It's going away partly because the pricing has been so bad in stamp pricing. You don't know.
I think your timing was really good because I think Charles, he was a Bitcoin collector. His brother had one of the best paper money collections ever assembled, Joel. So he really loves the hobby. And as you just mentioned, it was important to him to not just like sell it and, be like Krauss Publications that got just, broken up for pieces and parts. Mm-hmm. I think having good stewardship was important to him. And I think you're the right person at the right time because also, I think Charles understood that the Red Book had not kept up with the times, like from a digital standpoint, from a lot of changes and things. So I think it was either they were going to have to like really, make some investments that were going to require a lot of work, or they're going to have to find someone else who could take it over. And I think, from my understand, you mentioned generational things. A lot of times they kind of pass it down to like another, one of the heirs to the family, but I think that there wasn't anybody really available for the coin part. They have other things, other business. They're really also they're the biggest fireworks distributor in the country, which is, I can't imagine what that business is like, but they've got other family members that do that. So I think, what's that?
It's a cracking business.
It is, yes, it's big. But so your timing was really good. So I think they knew it needed new stewardship and to take it into the next level because the book had been static for quite a while.
I had to call you at that point and say, hey, I thought, oh my goodness. I mean, when you're buying a business like this, everything's secret. You can't tell anybody. It's all you have to be very careful. And I don't want to be the one who blows the deal. So
I kept it a secret.
Right. So
I didn't know.
Yeah, no, I had to keep it a secret. I mean, Mary said, John, you got okay. Well, I'm not going to mess that up. So I did that. And then of course, on the day of the closing, now I can't blow it. So I thought the first person I better call is Jeff. So, you and I have known each other a long time, and I didn't know anything about your real relationship with the company because I couldn't do that in due diligence. I had to just, due diligence was, I love the Red Book. How much inventory is in the warehouse? How do things work? Okay, we're game. We're going to give it a shot. And so at that point, what do I have? Well, you're the person I know best, the organization, and so very important to me. How this relationship continues, and you've just been fantastic to work with. From you and I did a lot of coin deals together, and now we're doing book publishing deals. This is a completely different scenario for us.
You and I had also kind of reconnected. You became the executive director for P&G, and I had just recently decided I had done that whole gig like 25 years ago, and I decided that P&G had kind of gotten stagnant as well and needed some change. So I got on the board. So you and I kind of reconnected in a way before we even started the Red Book thing. So it was really kind of funny how our relationships kind of came back together again.
Yeah, and I knew, of course, and you didn't, because it took a year. I mean, the whole deal with Whitman was a year-long process. It didn't happen in any short amount of time because the Andersons are a family. a family business in general, and because they love this product, right? This was going to be a very deliberate thing on their part, and yeah, and I knew, and I would sit with you in these board meetings and so on, and it was quite interesting, but no surprises for me how you are, and so anyway, I mean, I think it's great, and I think we have succeeded. Jeff and I are coming to this podcast because we've just put the 2026 edition of the Red Book to bed, which is to say, sent to the printer, be a couple months. Why? Because we print 200,000 copies of this book. This is the #1 book in the world for probably for almost any hobby, certainly in coins. And somebody asked me, well, what's the second best, the second most published book in numismatics in the world? And I would say it's probably the Blue Book. It's probably the Blue Book, which comes in around 50,000 copies a year, which is another podcast topic for us. Is what the heck is the Blue Book all about? We will delve into that one day. But the Blue Book is, this book here is make sure my screen picks this up. It's 40,000 copies a year, and then the third biggest book. So that begets the question: what is the biggest book that is not Whitman published in the world? And I wouldn't know what that would be.
Yeah, I mean, probably 10,000 books, if that, if any.
The Spink catalog in Britain recently sold to a new owner, but I think less than 10,000 copies for sure. So I don't know who has a bigger audience. And so in this day and age of everything going digital, we sort of live with feet in both worlds. At Gray Sheet, as you know, the only reason we could do the deal with Whitman and the Red Book was because we have terabytes of data now on pricing, auction records, and we make a living really not selling as much Gray Sheets and Red Books and things like that, but getting people to have digital subscriptions, which hopefully they find very valuable, and we can do that at a relatively low cost because we need the numbers of people who subscribe. So,
I think that the Red Book, the Whitman organization realized that digital was something that's, I mean, any business these days, if you're not digital, you're going to die at some point. So you have to have you have to have a digital element to your business. And I don't think they even knew where to begin on that. So luckily you started that journey a long time ago, and we'll be able to, help that, process along.
Well, I hope so, because every day, this podcast is a perfect example of us. I mean, I'm 55 years old. I'm not young. I don't really understand how the modern, economy quite works, because it changes every 2 weeks. So I think that it's, that we're going to do our best to try to make this work. But, print publications generally are on the decline in the world, I think. And, everybody wants things digitally and they want it in their app. And we just keep reinvesting in all those other things. But I personally believe that the book itself is magic, and physical book. And we also know that, you can't get this kind of information flipping through, even if it was Wikipedia style, it wouldn't be good enough, especially when you go to a coin show or you're sitting at your counter at your store and somebody walks in with a big, a trunk of coins or a box of them, and you got to quickly show them things. You don't want to be flipping through the internet for that. So there's a place for this product, and we aim to inform all of the readers, with this new edition, which you can talk about a little bit. But the one thing I'll plug for our side of things is that we put in the catalog numbers for our very unique catalog system we now call the GSID, which is the Gray Sheet identifier. We aim for that to be the industry standard, where PCGS has a number that a lot of people are familiar with, but PCGS isn't as devoted to our hobby as we are. So they really, they got diverted. They're thinking about cards now, and their parent company couldn't really, they're just not that involved. You and I are lifers, and they're just private equity. So
I think also when you mentioned, when I saw that first, that was kind of took me aback a little bit, kind of get used to that column in the Red Book. But then I realized, like, the Krause books all have numbers. They're, it's a universal, reference catalogs having a reference number in them is really kind of more of the standard than not the standard, because every coin is different, and it's like, how is that coin different than that coin? Is it really subtle? Does it deserve its own number? I mean, it is something that I think it'll take people a little bit getting used to, but I think that they'll really appreciate the fact that that'll be a useful tool as it gets rolled out, especially across all your platforms.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's radical, but I also think that there isn't such thing as a catalog of coins or stamps or let's say ball cards that I've ever seen other than the Red Book that didn't have numbers, that didn't have an indexing system. So without that indexing system, as you know, we've been working hard in this year's edition on top of changing the look and the feel of the book, keeping it intact, but with some good changes. We enhanced considerably the colonial and pre-federal coinage piece because it needed some dusting and but those some of those coins, by the time you really figure out the difference between one New Jersey with a full Coulter or a laughing fox, or it's too hard. It's easier to say, well, that's number 17324,
Right.
boom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then also it'll be important because you'll be able to need to, like, if you see a coin there, and if you look at one of your other books, like something else like your gray sheet, you'll make sure you're comparing apples to apples, which coin's which. So I think people will find out it's a very useful tool when they start, using it and seeing what it is.
That's right. That's right. And we want of course, the industry we want them to follow us. We want the major auction companies like Heritage and Stacks start showing these numbers. Heritage already puts our numbers on their auction lots, and CAC Grading Company was founded using our system. So they actually predate the Whitman arrangement, and all the coins from CAC have that number on them. So in
I
essence,
didn't know that. That's cool.
yeah, I mean, in essence,
It's
the
great.
Red Book becomes a submission form
Right.
enhancer to make life a lot easier if you're submitting coins to CAC. Now, again, I offer the same thing to NGC and PCGS, Annex, ICG. If they ever want to use our system, we're here for that because we're just trying to be a tool, in anyone's arsenal.
I think as it becomes, people see it for the first time, they get used to it. It'll be something that'll grow on people. Essentially, spinal. That's the right way of putting it. But then people will. I think the most important thing is we'll see the utility of it. They'll start using it and say, hey, that really is a good idea. So they'll like it. I when I first looked at it, it was kind of like a little distracting, but then very quickly I was like, wow, that's a good idea to do. So I kind of I had to be sold on as myself, and then after a little bit of using it, I could see that long term it's going to be it was a smart decision on your part, put it that way.
Well, thank you, and I hope, and that's also a good time to interject the fact that this podcast is and on YouTube. We're hosted on YouTube and other places, but on YouTube, any feedback that we get from this podcast will can Jeff and I can use in future editions. So if we get feedback that says, "Oh, we hate this," we hate the fact that you put those numbers in, which I'd be surprised, but okay. Or we hate that you did this, or we really like what you did, and we think you could do one step further. Jeff and I can now get this feedback in a way that we with 200,000 books being published, you'd be surprised how little feedback we are able to get, in print because people don't write letters anymore and things like that. So that's another feature. Hopefully, as a listener, you're thinking, oh, I always wanted the Red Book to do such and such, and so this is your opportunity to please, follow our channel here at Gray Sheet on the YouTube channel. Follow us, subscribe, and then comment, and then we will get back to you with good answers.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest messages I can relate to the people watching this is that, the Red Book I mentioned a little bit earlier, it had been the same for a long, long time. If you picked up the 2025 and picked up a 2021, you would like flip through it and it's like, a little, not a little change here and there, but not substantial. John is really willing to take chances. It's probably a good way of putting it. Willing to look for innovation, try to basically make the book better for the hobby and adjust it. Because as we all know, the hobby's changed a lot in the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, there's more information out there. John and I have this conversation, and one of the other reasons that this podcast I think will be important, and also why the Red Book is important, there is so much misinformation about coin collecting that's out there. I was even to be able to convince John that we have a page in the book that's it's a note from the editor about misinformation. There is no 1976 bicentennial quarter worth $25 million. So regardless if it's on the internet. So I think having good information that you can count on and that's done by the highest levels of expertise it's really, really, it'll be valuable for everybody. and it's valuable for the hobby. And I'm proud to actually be a part of someone. I'm proud to be part of a team now that's willing to take some chances, make the books better. Some doesn't work, we can retreat, and then we can do something else to make it better. So I appreciate your boldness and your approach with the Red Book now.
Well, thanks. And yeah, we'll break some things. We'll try to, but we also have to modernize and stay ahead of the this economy and keep coins relevant, keep coin collecting relevant, and do, there's a lot of fun things we can do with this project. So it's great having you on board. And again, to everyone listening, it's really all about, we're gonna maybe in the next episode, what we'll do is we'll dig into the 2026 edition changes, because they are numerous, including the fact that we've increased the size of the page from 5.5 inch by 8.5 inches to 6 by 9, which is more of a standard size book these days. Interestingly enough, this was just part of the old culture of Whitman, where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it wasn't broke, but I came along and I said, well, I want a 6 by 9 book. I want my catalog numbers in there, so therefore I needed another 1/2 inch. But
it'll be fun to talk about the change in the book. I think it'd be great for our next podcast. And I just want to say how thankful I am for what I do. Is normally about this time of the year, I would be sitting in my basement grinding on spreadsheets for weeks. And I did it, but I didn't like doing it, and it was difficult, but it was important work. But now I'm so glad that most of the fundamental pricing is done through the CDN organization, and it's freed me up to do much more. So now when you get the 26 Red Book, there's going to be new chapters there. There's going to be new fresh content, and that's something that'll be fun to talk about. There's quite a few really neat changes that'll be there, and it actually by not having to be chained to pricing, I can do, I can use my creativity and kind of, make the Red Book better from a content standpoint. So I'm really excited about the content aspect of the book, as far as, and not just the pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. So teasing up next, we've done completely new Gobrek dollar discussion into the 26th edition. We completely revamped Cal Gold, and for the first time referencing somebody else's catalog, because to me, someone else's catalog is very important. In this case, it's the Breen Gillio standard. Ron Gillio told me they have a new edition coming out. All the numbers for Cal Gold are BG numbers within this industry, and it takes 5 or 6 pages to list them all with pricing. We've done that, so we
huge improvement.
Huge improvement, because now every time you look at a Cal Gold piece, it's hopefully you should never buy an uncertified coin. Never buy an uncertified Cal Gold coin. They're mostly counterfeits out there. So you got to buy one at a PCGS, NGC CAC holder. And then, the BG number refers you to, how do you find it?
Well, as your viewers just to know, John called me about that chapter, about that, and a couple others. And he would say, is this really how people collect? And that's after thinking about it a little bit, that's not how they collect. They don't collect them by like that type or this, that. They collect them by BG numbers. That's a perfect example of like taking every part of the Red Book in its series and thinking about how do people really collect these. And we need to have a price guide that reflects that. I remember you called me also about Gobrek dollars. You said, Jeff, Gobrek dollars are a mess. And I'm like, well, they've been that way for a long time. Let me go dig and see what you're talking about. And I spent the next 3 days, deconstructing Gobrek dollars, and and that's one thing that's really, I tell people just always, and I'm sure John would tell you this, is one thing, a good thing about being a writer is how much you learn. But when you actually have to, try to present something and study it and put in a book, you have to really, my fundamental knowledge of Gobrek dollars now is a lot better than it was, 8 weeks ago when you first had that issue. So they're going to be totally represented differently in the Red Book than they ever had before. And I learned a lot about Gobrek dollars by doing it. And I think you guys all will too when you see it. It's really exciting news.
Absolutely. I mean, Gobrek dollars, we could do a whole hour on, which is crazy, because I think the total number of listings for Gobrek dollars, I don't know if it was 10, 12 listings, took us collectively weeks of study.
It's 11. I remember now it's 11 coins.
Records, trying to figure out how many are known of each different one and what the major differences are. I learned all that too. I've been trading coins for 35, 40 years, and I didn't know basically there's 3 different designs. You
Right.
got the no star obverse, the no star reverse, and the with star of both. And then there's, I think, one issue that has the full variants.
Yeah, originals, restrikes. There's
Right. It's a mess.
die rotations, everything.
And if by publishing this book, we get one more person, two more people who say, "Oh, now I find that I could collect these because I want to collect them by Red Book variety."
Right.
We will. They're so scarce. There's maybe some of these issues. There's 25 known or something, collectible yet scarce. And
Right.
if we change the hobby, just in that subtle way, adding one or two new collectors who say, and listen, if I had the money, I would be a collector of these Go Break dollars because I've always found them to be incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the old Red Book overcomplicated it unnecessarily. Like they talked about flip turns and metal alignment and coin alignment. These are not really how the modern collector worries about.
As you say, how do people collect? That's really
Oh,
what you got to. That's where you should start and work your way back and give them the information they want for collecting. It's kind of like, I think for the first time you're going to have full bell line on Franklin's or maybe full bands on Merc dimes, things like that. So that's how people collect. You shouldn't ignore it in the book. That's the fundamental book. That's important.
Right. We got full head quarter. I don't think we got full. I think we have. That's a good question about the full bell line Franklin's. But we definitely added full band Mercury dime and full
head standing quarters. Right.
Can you imagine? I mean, that's been a standard for my entire career since Jay Klein, really wrote his first book on it, and everybody really the difference in value on a 1926D, standing Liberty quarter, non-full head is $400, and a full head is 40,000.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, it's how people collect, and it's fundamentally important.
It's fundamentally important. I think so anyway, we have so many great things to chat about. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Jeff, for making time today. We'll keep making time to do this, and we'll bring people. Your comments are important to us. Tell us what you want to hear about so we can just make another podcast because, based on your comments, make fixes in future editions. All of it's great. Please subscribe.
Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks.